But let me go ahead and we'll do introductions. My name is Dr. Alessandria Polizzi. I'm the CEO of Verdant Consulting, and we offer resiliency, emotional agility, psychological health, and safety training, and partner with organizations to create healthy ones. And I'm here today very excited to raise the conversation around the emotional well-being and self-care for people who are responsible for making cultural change and cultural change champions. So we have a wide variety, diverse variety of folks who are joining us for that conversation today. And I'd like to just kind of go around and have everyone introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Armando, if you don't mind.
Great. Thanks, Al. I'm Armando Llorente. I am in New Hampshire, enjoying a nice sunny day today. Look forward to this conversation and sharing some of the wonderful challenges and experiences that my colleagues on this panel have had, and from the energy that we displayed in our preliminary conversation, this is going to be a great event. So thank you so much. And I'm the manager and prospector at Llorente HR Consulting.
Awesome. I'm going to continue going in alphabetical order. So that is you, Aurora. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Aurora Higgs. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I am a Black trans non-binary femme who was born and raised and currently lives in Richmond, Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy. So that means that in my work, I do acknowledge and grapple with both racialized legacies that still impact me today, but also what it's like growing up in that setting as a queer person and as somebody who not just transitions, but gave up a lot of perceived male privilege to do so and to live my authentic life. So I am a consultant. I'm a doctoral student studying digital representation of trans people. And I'm on the Virginia State Board for LGBTQ. It's an advisory board for our governor. So on top of that, I'm the founder of Borealis Consulting, RVA, a consulting firm that I use to tell authentic stories and help folks, companies, nonprofits, what have you, align their interests and values in DEI and social justice with their investments and their best practices. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Kim next.
I was hoping I wasn't going to follow Aurora.
Blame the alphabet.
Hi, my name is Kim Dukes. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Southerner raised in the American South, and I'm currently based in Boston, as I have been for the last 27 years. As a managing director at Koya Partners, which is part of Diversified Search, is the largest woman-owned executive search firm in the world. And I place leaders in the nonprofit space, mission-driven organizations. And I'm also, I consider myself a diversity recruiter. So executive recruiter with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have been a practitioner in that space as well for the last 16 years. I'm the mother of 1,000 children, or AKA 6, with 2 stepchildren. So a lot of activity, a lot of loud noise, and I love every bit of it. That's awesome. My story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. All right. So I was going to say, speaking of loud noise, but I'm not going to Tara next. I'm going to Nadia.
I can be loud.
Okay.
Hi, folks. My name is Nadia Button. Really excited to be here with you folks. My pronouns are she and her, and I am also located north of Boston. I am the founder and principal consultant at Nuance Consulting, where we focus on organizational effectiveness programs, change management, lean leadership, and of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, strategy, assessment work, all of the above things. I'm also in the midst of doing my doctoral research that's focused on identity and belonging in the workplace, particularly the Muslim American experience. And I am co-host of the Inclusive Collective, which is a podcast that's being launched this week. So shameless plug. So that's my loudness today. But I'm really excited being here with my esteemed colleagues. Looking forward to our vibrant conversation today.
Awesome. And speaking of vibrant, Nicole, would you go next?
Ooh, that's a lot to live up to. So hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Bruno. My pronouns are she, her, and doctor. I'm actually a veterinarian. I practice small animal medicine. I've been doing that for 16 years. I'm originally from New York City, from Queens. And in the last 5 years, I moved down to Houston, Texas. And so definitely a different perspective. But for the most part, my passion in DEI has been from the very beginning, because veterinary medicine is the least diverse medical profession in our country. And so not seeing myself in the role has been a constant journey, and has been my plight as a professional to really expose children of color to veterinary medicine, or STEM in general, but specifically vet med. But recently, what I have found is that while we are improving in our pipeline, we aren't taking care of our current professionals, our current BIPOC in the industry. And a lot of it has to do with hospital culture. And in the last month, I've decided to branch out on my own. And actually, I'm working on developing a veterinary hospital certification program, training in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And actually not only just teaching, but showing hospital and veterinary teams how to apply it in our everyday practice. And so that is what I'm looking forward to in this year, is launching a pilot program. And that is my story.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole. And then finally, Tara, you don't mind?
Hello, I'm Tara Furiani. I am the CEO and host of Not the HR Lady. We are coming back for season 3 on March 31st, every Thursday at 7 o'clock, followed by a live show right after. So please join us for next week, I think, which is pretty exciting. I am a mom of 7 kiddos. I have been a chief people officer for 12 years and left the corporate world of work to start my show and my keynote speaking business, and really try to shift to the world of work from a standpoint of
money.
Hold on, I'm working on the mute.
And sexism and racism and all that good stuff. So we talk about a lot of things, all things people absolutely no bullshit. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, and my pronouns are she and they.
Awesome.
It's not something you can pay off. It's something that's paid monthly.
There we go. Found it. Thank you, Tara. So let's get started. First question. How have cultural changes in organizations been articulated, defined, as you guys have been, taking on that work? How have those things been described? I'm looking. So Tara, you are not muted, so you get to go first, even though you just took a drink.
You bet. How are they defined? I think cultural change is something that's such a topic right now, and the whole world of work, it's been changing for a while, obviously, but in the last 2 years specifically, obviously, there's been such a huge focus on everything related to people, because I think, frankly, we were all kind of so interested and online and seeing what was happening in the world, and really paying, honestly, a lot of attention that I don't think we really paid before. And that cultural shift started, I think, when we started raising our voices, when we started saying, we're not taking this behavior anymore, or you get let go from a job, because of COVID. And then you realize how toxic that place was, and you didn't even know it while you were in it, because our society sort of teaches us and ingrains in us that we are to be loyal to our employers, that we're supposed to just take it, that we're supposed to come and do the best job we can, and they pay us a salary and we should be grateful. And I think that's the start of that cultural shift, is that now there was so much awareness from us, from the employee, going, hold on a minute. So you're telling me that before, when my kid was sick, I couldn't work from home, but now I have to work from home forever because there's a pandemic. But just last week, I was unable to work remotely because you don't want me to. You don't like the lack of control, and you think I won't be able to do my job. Now you're banking on the fact that I can, while working from home, without resources, without tools, with fear of the unknown. And I think that's really where it started. It started really making dramatic shifts in the right direction, and where people and companies were talking about it loudly enough for other people to go, hold on a second, I want to jump into this conversation. And here we are.
Yeah, that's great. Kim, go ahead.
And I wanted to add to that and say, and Tara, for me, one of the cultural changes that really stood out for me based on all the social flashpoints and all of the things that's happened in this country after the murder of George Floyd is we talk about different things at work than we used to talk about. There's all of this new language, these new terms. There's white supremacy terms like anti-Black racism.
Yes.
All of these terms that would have, I think, sat a little differently pre-2020 that we're dealing with and having conversations around. And the what is my word? The fact that we're so tired at this point after
We're tired.
Screams all day, every day. And really, for me, it's kind of looking inwardly and changing the way that I communicate based on, I'm not as careful. I'm a little more in your face than I ever was. I'm on a podcast with braids. I would have never done that 3 years ago. I mean, there's lots of differences that make you a lot more comfortable stepping into your own skin and being non-apologetic.
Love
That's right.
that. Who else? Nadia.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. And it's been 2 years since I think a lot of these organizations have made these pronouncements, right? Like these emphatic pronouncements to do better, be better. And you're not just seeing it from an employee standpoint, you're having customers demand it, right? You're having consumers who are purchasing these products and services really demand it, which is incredible. And when you look 2 years later, part of me wonders if my colleagues see this in the field and in the work is there's definitely a mindset to push the work forward. And there's a way that it's phrased. So it's, to me, I'm hearing words like DE&I initiative, DE&I program, where I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but the mindset around that doesn't necessarily connect to a change, right? Like to cultural change. And so I sometimes fear that the challenge that leaders and organizations will face is that it's an additive thing to teams or to the D&I team now or the HR team or whatever group we placed it in. And so, you know, my question is, are we embedding kind of the norms, the language, really the culture shift that is needed to really help kind of push this work forward? And I think there is change that we're starting to see absolutely today, but it's absolutely going to be a journey.
That's fantastic. Armando, yes.
So Nadia, great point. I've worked with a client for a few months now who is all about, we want to do the right thing and really look at the strategic opportunity to incorporate DE and I into our organization. And it's all well and good, but the initial perspective was, this is a check the box because we want to make sure that our strategy reflects that we have this in our playbook. And I just stopped and I said, okay, it's one thing to have it in your playbook. The other piece is, how's it going to be part of your culture and what are you going to do as far as really launching this in an effective manner? I can give you a sample policy, then all you need to do is insert the company name that says XYZ company is now committed to diversity in the workplace and we're going to do blah, 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 check the box and you're done. Or is this an opportunity for you to say, here's what my vision is at the end of this journey from a cultural change perspective, and how are we going to get there? And I think it sort of stopped the leadership team in their initial enthusiasm to get this done, to sort of back off and realize that it wasn't just going to be check the box, we snap our fingers, we distribute the policy, and we're good. Oh, and I'm sorry, we're also going to have employee resource groups, and that's going to fix everything for us. And, you know, a month from now, we're going to be just smoking along and everything's going to be wonderful. And when we do our employee engagement survey, it's going to be the new and improved company X. So as you can appreciate, I'm being a little bit sarcastic here, but really a very telling opportunity where here was my initial conversation with the leadership team that had one vision that they thought was well-intended under the guise of strategy, to all of a sudden just saying, okay, let's really embrace and understand what we're trying to do here from a strategic cultural initiative, and that this is going to have a life of its own.
Armando, before we move on to anyone else, I'm just curious to stay on that topic for a second. What was the response?
They're rethinking their initial push just to get this done, and have in fact slowed down for communications and being able to have progress or update meetings with the organization to say, here's what we're doing for purposes of positioning ourselves in the community. This is what we're doing to really enhance our recruitment efforts, to really be inclusionary and let the community, the local community, know that we're all about bringing in people who may be different than we've had for the last 10, 15, 16 years. So I'm excited to see how this evolves.
Yeah. Niccole or Aurora, anything you want to add?
I mean, a lot of people have said so much, but, you know, from my perspective, you know, as a veterinarian, I've worked in independent hospitals where they're privately owned. And if it's not the position of the leader or the owner of the hospital, then nothing happens. And, you know, it really manifests in hiring and recruitment and just how we service the communities. So that's one perspective. And I lived there for about 8 years. And then the other last 8 years, I've been in the corporate sector in veterinary medicine, where once again, I see that when there is a disconnect with leadership, there is no advancement into DEI work. There's no budgeting. And for myself, you know, being a leader in my hospital, I was able to do the things that I wanted to see happen. But when George Floyd happened, it was the turning point for me, because as a New Yorker, I lost my grandmother. I could not mourn. I could not go home. I had to deal with, you know, grieving for an important person in my life by myself. And then we have George Floyd, and I am biracial, and I'm married to a Black man, and I have 2 Black children, and trying to then be very emotional at work where you're doing an empathetic job. And that was just too much. And especially in Houston, when there was protesting and we were seeing and hearing nothing from leadership as to what our stance was as a company, that was my breaking point for me. And that's where I realized that, you know, we weren't going to make true change if it didn't start with leadership, if it didn't start with representation in the C-suite. And for me, that has been my journey in the last 2 years, is really pushing the fact that we have to be seen to be heard, and our stories matter and are very impactful. And nobody has that perspective. And leading during the time of COVID has really opened my eyes to how much more we can do as leaders.
Aurora, can you wrap us up on how do you hear organizations speak to the cultural change that they're looking for at the outset?
Yeah, so I really appreciate a lot of what everyone's been saying. I've been hearing a mix of hearing a lot of good progress, and then also a lot of constructive kind of feedback of where we need to push it more. As your resident angry radical millennial, my perspective on it has really been that I'm seeing, from where I'm standing, I'm seeing a lot of performance without a real understanding of the nuance behind what the actual needs are. And so again, when the George Floyd murder happened and everyone was having discourse around it, I saw a lot of companies making pendular shifts away from how they've been discussing, how they've been even conceptualizing the appropriateness of talking about race at work. All of that shifted to the other extreme. And a lot of that was led by leadership. And so you could look at that as like, okay, that's great, push in the right direction. However, as somebody who's been in the room with some of those folks in leadership, they don't even know why they're doing it. And so they just know that they're reacting to like this gut feeling that, oh no, we're going to get canceled by our community, so we need to do this. I don't know why, I don't really get it, I don't even really agree, but I know that if I want my company to survive, I need to do this. It has, and when that nuance isn't really internalized by leadership, and I don't believe that we can do but so much with that kind of foundation. And so as your angry radical millennial, I'm looking forward to the natural ebb and flow that we see in the world, and a little bit of corporate or I'll say enterprise Darwinism. I'm actually looking forward to those performing themselves out and actually making their actual values be known, so that our consumers and the people who are stakeholders can actually invest in companies that they know thoroughly and whose values are actually being performed in sincere ways and not just to placate their market. And so with the great exit, a lot of people quitting their jobs, a lot of people starting their own businesses, I actually think that this is going to create a lot more small businesses with a lot more authentic, sincere values that they will push. And I think these values will be rightfully nuanced. I don't think we're going to see these big corporate entities anymore who are trying to cast a wide net. I think that enterprise and small business, even in consulting, even in areas that we never thought about small business because technology has taken us so far, we can even maybe conceptualize people having one-person tech companies, with the way that crypto is running and NFTs. I think that the more that we have diverse enterprise who are sticking to their actual values and finding their niches, we're going to find that we'll no longer need to find these one-size-fit-all companies who have to try and, you can't give money to an LGBT organization and then give money to an anti-LGBT organization, hope that you're going to please everyone. That's not okay. Chick-fil-A. And I think that what I would like to see from now on is people embracing putting pressure on these companies to the point where if they can't walk the walk, then they need to step out of the game and let somebody else who is more authentic and more transparent in their operations, and someone who isn't trying to please everyone. I'm not looking for a company that wants to please me or everyone. I just want to look for a company that's doing what they say they're going to do, and I decide if I appreciate that and will give that company my business. And there's 7 billion people in the world. I think we can support a little bit more diversity in enterprise if they're pushing authenticity.
Well, thank you for that. I think you hit on a lot regarding nuance, and I think Armando, you actually mentioned that as well. And just kind of for those joining, this came up because Armando and I were discussing the feeling of where we are 2 years in on this work. And so I even in my post about it was like, how are you doing? And so how are we doing as far as the people who are taking the lead and taking that charge?
I just took, I'll start. I just took 7 months away. And I'm blessed and grateful and able to do that. But it was the difference between not making it, quite literally, and or pushing through. And I chose myself every day of the week. My mental health was incredibly low. This is hard work. It is hard to talk about, from where I sit. It's hard to talk about the things that other people until recently, and still not enough people, to Aurora's point, are talking about or doing, right? Talk about it and then do it. That's the action that we're hoping results out of these conversations. But for me, I have taken a significant step away from everything that I'd been doing. We pulled our show 2 episodes into season 3 because I just couldn't do it anymore. I was tapped, burnt out, frustrated. My mental health was as low as it could possibly be. And there were literal days where I couldn't get out of bed for days on end. And I say that not for any other reason, but to say that, that's okay. It's okay that I was struggling mentally, and it's okay to take a step away, and it's okay to seek help, and it's okay to put yourself first. And it's okay to go, I'm going to pass the baton to someone else doing the hard stuff for a little bit, and I'm going to refocus look inward, try to figure out how to give myself the peace that I need to continue fighting. And I'll tell you, it was the best thing I could have done. And we're going to talk about it on our show, but like, I tried different modalities of self-care. I have severe PTSD. I went through an incredibly difficult divorce and custody case. I'm still going through it with my ex-husband. And it's all of that in the middle of COVID. You know, my mom has cancer. The whole world around me was just collapsing. I've been to hell and back in the last 2 years, and I still have a smile on my face, but that is not for a lack of not giving myself the necessary attention and grace that I needed to get through it. And I still have days where I'm down. I was down 2 days ago, and I looked at Justin, my partner, my co-host, my support, and I just said, I just can't do it today. I just can't look at my phone. I just can't get on the internet. I just can't fight the good fight today. Or I won't make it probably till tomorrow. And that's a lot of emotional awareness. But the good news about all of us is that we're already, generally speaking, incredibly emotionally aware, intuitive, and our intellect there is very high. So if we just allow ourselves to practice what we preach to ourselves, that I think goes a long way. And for me, it's been the difference between not getting up anymore and getting up to be here with you guys today to talk about it. And I took extreme measures. I tried ketamine therapy. I've been doing talk therapy my whole life, but I tried ketamine therapy in an infusion perspective in an office with a doctor. I tried Mind Bloom and partnered with them. I've documented the whole experience, so you're going to get to see it. But like, I went through everything to try to make myself well and whole. I started walking. I lost weight. I started getting back into the things that I really enjoy, like acting. Fun plug. I'll be on an HBO show called Love and Death. You can Google it. And I took a break to do 8 days of filming. I'm doing it here in the next 2 weeks. Justin and I both got cast. So I started to focus on what makes me happy. What do I like to do? I love this work, but it can't just always be this work all the time. And I think we don't give ourselves often enough grace and enough, what is it, support that we give others. We don't do that for us. And I did, and I had to. And I'll tell you, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself in my 41 years, millennial, Gen X adjacent self. That's the best thing I've ever done for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Tara. And I will add, and I'd love to hear from others that, you know, I was just on a podcast yesterday and they asked me, what's the number one thing you'd recommend? And the number one thing is self-compassion. And so talking to yourself, like you would your best friend, like you would someone around you. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is we care for others. And this is why I focus a lot on HR well-being, is we care for others. We need to apply the same to caring for ourselves. Kim, I see you're off mute. Did you want to add on to this?
You just struck a chord with me, Tara, and I thought about the whole emotional awareness piece and how that has been a journey for me over the last 2 years. Because for me, and I'll go back to 2020, unpacking a pandemic. I was in the healthcare field, unpacking a pandemic, unpacking the murder of George Floyd. I worked really, really hard early in my career to make sure that I separated that girl from the South with that PTSD from what I experienced growing up with the work that I was doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. This is a business case. This is my personal experience. Well, guess what? Crash. Mm-hmm. There's a huge crash between that personal experience and what I did for work. So now professional Kim is impacted, right? How do I deal with that? And this has been a real journey. I've never had to deal with that before. I've never felt like crying in a meeting at work before. I've never realized how much I took on other people's pain, you know, and between the pain and sitting through incident command, trying to watch healthcare disparities and how we're going to address that. I was exhausted and did not recognize it. And I'll also say, Aurora, angry, like really angry. I turned into the angry Black woman that I always tried not to be, because I couldn't access, look, where's this coming from? So finally figured out this is something, and you're not a mean-spirited person. So what do you need? What do you need? To the point that I did start doing things for myself that I'd never done before. And I learned how to not take on other people's pain, but, you know, still be able to have empathy, to the point that I when I changed jobs and I came to Koya and came back to Search, I'm still in the mission-driven space. So I'm still led by my heartstrings. I'm always going to be that way. That's just that's how I'm built. But so relieved that it just wasn't my job. Just asking for like that little break, just a break for a moment. So now the conversation is, how do we take this on from clients who are in that space, and how can we support them? And I feel like now that I've exercised better emotional awareness, I'm in a better place to be able to help people get over that hump that I had to get over.
That was it for me, Kim, right? It was like, I was struggling. So like, if I'm struggling, how can I possibly think to help you? And you do, and you keep doing it. And then you're like, hold on a minute. So I really feel that it's interesting spot to be, I think, when you're somebody who is so aware, and yet, you know, there's awareness that you tend to push off because you can, because you have to, because you've separated real Kim from work Kim. And it's just, it's an interesting time for us, but giving ourselves that space and applying the emotional intelligence and awareness that we know we have, it's so critical.
Sandra, can I ask a question? I wanted to say something because Kim and Tara really got my mind going, but I don't want to drift off too much. What was the original question?
The original question was, how are you doing? 2 years in.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Well then, yeah, no. Well, I guess one of the things that I wanted to say is that just hearing, you know, that there are other folks in this space who are going through similar things. I mean, Tara, just you even saying that you went through ketamine therapy, like that is so, I mean, I love that I'm in a space where I'm hearing people talk about that, because there are so many, we don't know what it's like. You can't describe what we're not allowed to talk about at work, but when you hear the keywords, you're like, oh, I know that that's not normally work appropriate. But what is an organization if it's not a gathering of human beings who are then under this weird delusion that we're not allowed to be humans at work because we're supposed to be workers at work.
But like, we're not bots. Like, we are human beings with human emotions and human reality happening all around us.
Right. And so it's funny because this year I don't know if it's I don't want to take on the diagnosis of PTSD if I haven't been formally diagnosed, but I can tell you I've been through a drug overdose of both of my parents. They survived, just for one of them to, you know, try to take their life again. Trigger warning here. I've helped organize a work strike at an organization that I had a lot of, I mean, I thought this was going to be my job. This was going to be the best place I could work, because I had experienced such horrible transphobia at my last jobs that I wasn't allowed to talk about. Because I wasn't really supposed to talk about my trans identity in those orgs, as I come to find out. And all these things are happening and they're affecting how I show up at work, but I'm not allowed to talk about them because they're not work safe subjects, which creates this really weird cognitive dissonance, and you end up dissociating to the point where you do fulfill that prophecy of I strip my humanity off of myself when I show up into work. But then that has implications and issues. And what happens when I'm interacting with people who decided not to strip their humanity when they came into the office, and I did, and I'm working with folks like that, or I have power over them, and I'm actively removing humanity from. So I then become a perpetuator of the problem and being aware of that. One thing I will really say that has helped me a lot, and I'm gonna take on some courage and be as open as Tara has been, I'm a burlesque performer. And it is one of the coolest things to be able to talk about with my peers at work, because again, we're all adults, we're at work, there's nothing inherently bad about burlesque. It has a rep, but so do a lot of things that are not actually the case.
Like, do you
in
know what
reality.
goes on in the C-suite? Like, let's just talk
Oh
about
my God.
like, I
right.
know you know. So like, you're a burlesque performer. Cool. I've been to a
Nothing.
strip club with my boss.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like a strip club where people were naked, like at a work trip because everybody was going. And I'm like, I guess I should probably be there. Like I was invited. I'm so with you. Like nobody's talking. The rules have changed, but also like certain rules, right? Like I shouldn't necessarily be going to a strip club on the company dime. That's a strange flex to not be able to then talk about my salary at work, or I could get fined. Like, this is just weird, right? The old world of work is so weird. I love everything you're saying, Aurora. I'm going to shut up. I want
Well,
to
no, you're fine. I was just going to say,
go ahead,
I was just going to
Aurora,
say, it's really interesting to be able to, I've seen the difference of bringing myself to work and bringing that humanity back into the office and stop dissociating so much. But that really does mean not code switching as much. It means being angry at work. It means crying at work, because to be human is to be fully human. So that's the thing I'll say, is that once you do one little thing, in my experience, it's been a floodgate, and I don't think I'm going to go back.
It's really hard to go back, I'll say from experience. But just to kind of validate what you're saying, and Armando, I see you're off mute, so we'll go to you next. But 60% of our psychological health, I saw a study last week, it's in one of my presentations, 60% of our psychological health comes from our interactions in the workplace. And yet we live in a world in which you pretend like you can shut emotions off and that they're optional, which that is actually the dysfunction, pretending like you don't have emotions. So it's a big part of, I think, the dysfunction that happens within our organizations. Armando, you were going to add.
No, and I think the discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago as we were processing the impact that us being the drivers for particular organizational change or organizational effectiveness, it does take a toll on us. And I talked a little bit about, gee, on one hand, you're spotlighted and you know, we are the much ballyhooed champion, and ooh, this is a cool project and the neat initiative. And all of a sudden you run into that leadership team that says, don't care. We're still focused on whatever the issue is, whether it's, in this case, is let's get people paid, and we'll worry about all this other DEI stuff and the latest cool buzzwords. And you know, I processed that in sleepless night. It's like, what am I going to do? And as we started to discuss, and many of you have already discussed, is what about me? If I'm going to be the champion, I've got to watch out for myself. So, you know, my happy place is just going out for a run, or I can go downstairs and play the drums and just chill and know that that gives me an opportunity to sort of center and come back. And it sort of gives me that energy to say, okay, how do I look at this in a different way, that I'm then able to go back to the leadership team and say, all right, here's what we need to do. I realize we're not going to do this overnight, and I realize we need to get people paid, but things aren't going to change if we continue to do one of these, because we got to get people paid. And thought through ways to sort of make incremental changes. One of the best decisions I made was getting one of the most spirited, and in this case, real sponsor that was on our board of directors, to say, Armando, I'm with you, whatever you need, and dropped her name into very strategic conversations. And it was like, boom, the world changed. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Yes, I think we'll be able to embrace this initiative from a DE&I standpoint, and we'll be happy to discuss this at our quarterly reviews. And oh, your idea to have a little scorecard and just talk about some of the simple changes that we've made. What a great suggestion. And I looked at the my partner from the board as this conversation was going on, and she just was shaking her head like, I told you this is going to happen, and sure enough, it did. But self-care is huge.
Yeah, Nadia, do you mind adding what you'd like to add, but also talking about how do you take care of yourself? That's one of the things I want to make sure we hit on. How do we care for ourselves as the people in these spots?
So that's a great question. I'll even just start off by saying, I think, so it sounds like many of my colleagues on this kind of agree to this, and I've definitely spoke to other folks that are in our field, and we're social activists, right? And so when I think about that or reflect on that, there's no time off for us. So our identity is in the workplace, right? We're focused on change. And then I'll speak for myself. When I come home, I'm like writing postcards to the next voters. I'm my dissertation and research is around identity and belonging in the workplace. My conversations with my friends and my family are always around social inequities and social injustice. And, and then on top of it, you have things like wars happening, and you have the pandemic still happening, and you have, protests still happening. It's like there's so much going on in the world. And so I think recently I actually listened to, I don't know if folks are familiar with Brene Brown, but she's a professor and researcher on belonging. And she had a guest named Karen Ranwald on her podcast. I think it was like in November or sometime in the fall. And Karen is an activist and a lawyer, and she talks about how you have to embrace joy and beauty in order to be resilient. And she said, never apologize for embracing joy and beauty, because even when the world is falling apart or falling down, what really fuels you back up, that those joy and beauty will refuel you for activism. And I truly believe that. So I think, yes, self-compassion, self-care are so important. But for me, what that looks like from like a tactical perspective is like, I have to disconnect from like watching the news on an hourly basis. Like I had to stop getting all of the feeds sent to me. Because for me, it was not just the last 2 years. Like, of course, George Floyd's death was terrible and horrific, but it's been since like 2015 for me, like maybe even prior to that. But like, it's been ongoing for the last 6, 7, 8 years now. And so that means like maybe I don't want to get off social media, but maybe that's following more like happier news, or maybe like better news that makes me smile or like shed a tear. I definitely, like Armando had said, I don't go running. I'm not a runner, but I'm a walker and I'm a hiker. And I think being outside really grounds me. And I think what's really important is connecting with your family and friends. And maybe it is talking about things that we talk about in the workplace, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's like, maybe it is watching reality TV because it just distracts you from everything else in the world, and that's okay. So, I mean, you asked me what are some things. Those are some things I do. I watch a lot of Real Housewives, and I'm okay with it because the world is heavy right now.
How about the rest of, thank you for that. Nicole, how do you help how did you get yourself motivated to make this big leap too and start your own business?
Well, I mean, it's good to know that I'm in company where I'm not alone, because I struggle with this every single day, is just trying to find balance, because it's not just this type of work, it's still that I'm practicing. And then on top of it, I have 2 young children and a husband and a family life. And some days I just feel very overwhelmed, because it's very hard to shut this work off, because I'm so passionate about it, because it's so important to me. And because of the type of work that I do within it, it is hard to shut it off when you have relationships with mentees and they call you or they text you and they want a conversation, and you just sometimes like, I can't, like, I need mentoring, I need mentorship right now, And so it's finding that balance for me. And so an hour ago, I was getting a massage. That's what I did today. I decided that I was going to get a massage, and it was going to be today. And so, because I hadn't had one in 3 months. And I think for me, with all the craziness that I'm dealing with right now, I'm time blocking for me. And even if it's just an hour, since I am a young mom, like I remember when I was not a mom and, even not a wife, where I could just take the day to go to the spa, and I don't have that. I have to just find balance in having just an hour to get a massage. Or I did join the Peloton cult, and I have a Peloton, and even just taking a couple of workout sessions that are 10 to 15 minutes is just time for me. And I hate getting up at 5:30 in the morning to do it, but it's my time. And that's how I find my balance, is setting myself to say, it's me first, and then I can be better for the world. And then as far as Al, what you asked me, I think for myself, you know, as I was navigating, practicing and wanting to pursue DEI work, I realized that I could do the DEI work and practice if I was working with people that shared my values. And when I was constantly fighting against what I felt were my values and the company that was saying, these were my values, but they're not acting upon it, I realized that I had to just put that hat down and pivot. And it's hard because sometimes you look at it as quitting because you were doing work and you wanted to see it through. But for me, I felt like it was actually affecting my emotional health. And I chose me. So as I hear everybody else having moments in their life where they choose themselves, and Brene Brown has been a very, very big influence on me. All of her Dare to Lead podcast is like I'm glued to. And I walk a lot because it reminds me of my grandmother. And so between Peloton, walking, massage, all of that, I just try to find that one activity a day for me to do for me.
Thank you for that, Nicole. What other tips do you guys have for people who may be feeling tired?
So this is for those folks out there that feel a little bit more subversive, who want to, who kind of feel stifled by like respectability. That is my big thing. I am very anti-respectability. And for those of you who don't know, respectability is all about putting on a show that I guess, how would I express respectability? Basically, it's when you are performing in a way that is seen as being favorable, as being showing decorum, as being a respectable person in society. And so a lot of that actually really aligns with white supremacy in our culture. So the more that you speak, act, enjoy the activities of the culture that is the most privileged or seen the most favorably, then the more of those privileges you get, except there's a caveat in that you're never accepted as that actual class of people unless you are demographically part of that group. But there are little bits of social capital that you get if you're, say, a Black person who doesn't use Black vernacular and instead uses a more accepted white vernacular, what have you. So for me, analyzing respectability and kind of asking myself, well, if I wasn't worried about sort of how people viewed me, and if I also kept the boundaries of do no harm and don't infringe on other people's rights or privacy, but also did things that I think could be really enjoyable for me. I really like stepping into the taboo, and when you do step into the taboo, you kind of realize that there's really no reason for it to be taboo. It's just as positive, negative, light, and dark as anything else out there. It's just a matter of whether or not it's in style. There are a lot of things that we do right now that would make our grandmothers pass out, blush and pass out. And so I like to look at things and demystify them, devilify them, and see where there's joy. So I talked about burlesque. That's amazing. I love that. I also love doing things like going to drag shows, things that are kind of countercultural. I like listening to podcasts where sex workers are talking about their perspective on society, because if you haven't seen our society through the eyes of a sex worker, then you're missing a complete part of the society that we're perpetuating. And so, but it's also really enjoyable to kind of play around and look under, these little rocks and places that you're not supposed to look under, and be a little free and do things that are a little edgy and, nothing harmful. Don't hurt anyone or yourself, but see what's out there and see, what's a little cheeky, what you can enjoy. We're all adults, we're all consenting. We know, I think informed consent is great, but yeah, go to a burlesque show, see a cabaret show, go see a drag show, express pleasure in ways that you never thought you were allowed to before, that are beautiful in and of themselves.
And that's my reality show, by the way. So Nadia watches The Housewives. I watch RuPaul.
Same.
And repeats of, and then all the shows around it. Anyway,
No,
Um,
same. We'll talk.
let's kind of wrap up. We've got about 7 more minutes. I want to check the chat, see if anybody had anything, any questions, and if anybody wanted to share any other comments on taking care of ourselves, I love how you said that, Nicole. I'm going to focus on me, right? Me first, and then I can figure out the needs of others. Anything you guys want to add?
I'll add just kind of these 3 questions that have helped me. So I keep speaking about Karen Waldron, who was on Brene Brown, because she just spoke to me. She wrote a book, and she asks herself on the daily, every morning, she talks about how she makes this a habit by journaling. And she asks 3 questions in the journal, and it's, how can I feel connected today? How can I feel healthy today? And how can I feel purposeful today? And I've been doing that for the last 2 weeks. And I'll tell you, I don't know what's shifted in my brain. I can't like exactly call it out. I can't name it, but I will tell you that something around journaling, and even if it's just journaling like nonsense, it has totally helped me just kind of, I don't know, feel centered for the rest of the day. And then answering those 3 questions, it's almost like goals for myself. It's like, how am I going to take care of myself today? And what I really appreciate that she talks about is really making it a habit, because oftentimes, I'll speak in the I form, oftentimes what happens to me is I get so burnt out, and then I'm just like, forget it. I want to cut everyone out. I want to like, cut ties with everyone and just be like, I'm done. And so she uses this as a form of proactive kind of burnt outness. And so I think the key is, how do you create some of these habits that will help you be prepared when something kind of, involves where like something kind of blows up in your world. And that's what I'm kind of aiming for, because oftentimes, and I don't know if everyone else felt this, but oftentimes I'd wake up, especially from 2016 to 2020, where I would wake up and every morning was like this terrible news thing that was just devastating, and it would set me back for days. And so really putting some of these practices in place and making them more habit for me, has been really key. So I hope that helps.
I can do a shameless plug, and then Armando, you can help us wrap up a little bit. You can also take a resiliency training where you learn about how to do those things like journaling. And I can tell you the science on that, Nadia, is that one study showed that if you spend just 15 minutes a day over 10 days doing self-reflection, you'll see a 25% improvement in your emotional well-being. And so that's what you've been doing, by the way.
That's what I've been doing. There we are. The science.
There you go, the science. Armando, I see you're off mute. Did you have something to add?
So I just came back from vacation the week before last. It was an opportunity to get away from New England, and then went to a nice tropical getaway. My wife made a comment 2 or 3 days into the trip with respect to, oh, it's nice to see vacation, Armando. And it just sort of stopped me in my tracks for purposes of, you are just so relaxed here, rather than, we're all going 1,000 miles an hour. And interestingly, now that we've been back for a few days, it's been an opportunity for timely reminders. And so what happened to vacation, Armando? And it just sort of grounds me on what you were saying, Nadia, for purposes of, okay, what's my purpose today, and what's the opportunity to really be impactful, which is a win-win, because I know it gives me the internal gratitude to know that, oh, I've worked with a client, or I've worked with a student to help them with whatever challenge they may have, and sort of use that as my energy, my positive energy, rather than the scenario that I mentioned previously, where I was all hyped to launch this project and so forth, and the angst that was created when suddenly the leadership said, no, we're not going to do that. And then, I processed that, and I had the sleepless night. And so now what I'm trying to do is just sort of, okay, chill. If this is the way it's going to be, I'm not going to put that monkey on my back. And I think that was what you were referring to, Kim, where you suddenly took somebody else's weight and made it part of yours and dragged yourself even further down. And it was like, no, I know what my limit's going to be here. And my focus is just trying to remain balanced, focused, and trying to be in that vacation mode that I referenced.
Thank you so much, Armando. I know that Tara has to jump off. I wanted to add one thing. In addition to the studies on self-reflection, the question that she asks, how will I get connected? That is one of the 3 ways that you create self-compassion. So self-compassion is speaking to ourselves with kindness, connecting with other humans, and mindfulness. So if you enjoyed our session and would like to learn more, we have a lot more coming through Verdant Consulting, which I'll share now. We're doing a series on psychological safety. These are 30-minute sessions. We have several coming up. We have a lot focused on HR burnout. The thing that we talked about, taking on other people's stress, is something called vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, which we do experience in HR. And then we have another emotional well-being session just like this, focused on emotional well-being and technology. There's been a lot of studies about how IT teams have been stressed as well. And then as part of our overall HR well-being community, we're doing another HR well-being week, kicking off the week of 6/6. So that's a lot of opportunities to learn more, share more, and take care of ourselves. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who joined and those who registered, and are going to watch the recording. But mostly, thank you so much to the folks who were on the roundtable, who shared your experiences. You guys were vulnerable and open, and all the things I had hoped for. So thank you so much for sharing your stories with everyone.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Have a great rest of the day.
Great.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.